I am Bray, and with me as always is my co-host Natalie.
Hi guys.
And today we're joined by a very special guest, Hannah Jones.
Hi.
She is a studio art major and an aspiring art conservationalist.
Yes.
Hannah, tell us about yourself a little bit. Give us a little background.
Okay, well, I am a senior studio art major. I also have a minor in English. I'm an art generalist, so that means I just take whatever classes they let me take until I graduate. And after I graduate, I'm interested in going to graduate school for art conservation. And ultimately, I'd like to work in paintings conservation specifically, but honestly, all of it is so interesting to me. So that's what I'm hoping to do in the future. And we're just in beginning stages of that right now, so taking all of the first steps. But yeah.
Awesome. That is so cool. That actually already answered one of my questions.
Great. Okay.
I really wanted to know what section of art conservation you're most interested in, because when I did my research, I do study for this. I do study for this. I was there's painting, architecture, textiles, photography, and books and paper and wood and everything. And I was I wonder what she's most interested in.
Yeah.
What draws you the most to paintings? And do you dabble in restoration and conservation, or what's the deal with that?
So I am interested in honestly all of them, and the first time that I got to actually try any conservation stuff in real life was last summer when I studied abroad in Florence, Italy. Whoa. For 2 months.
That is so cool.
It was awesome.
That's the coolest thing that's ever been said in this room, I think.
But I took some courses, some workshop courses on conservation, and we did paintings conservation, a wood sculpture, there were paintings on canvas and paintings on wood, which are kind of two different sides of things. And then we also worked on frescoes and wall paintings.
Ooh, okay.
And I kind of thought I was going to be most interested in sculpture, in objects or wood stuff. And I ended up being so interested in paintings because they have so many different pieces. It's not just one material. You usually have canvas stretched over a wood frame, and then you have the actual paints, and then you have a varnish layer. And all of these things have these different kind of chemical makeups and different ways that they behave physically over time. They age differently, and you have to know so many different things to be able to work on them. You have to be able to do woodworking. Sometimes you have to be able to do gilding, for frames and stuff like that. So what I loved about working on the paintings was that it was such a different thing every single day.
Right.
And there was just so much to learn about it, which I'm sure is kind of the same for a lot of them, but paintings specifically were the ones that I was super interested in.
So they give y'all, for the workshops, they give y'all chemicals, and you had to I love seeing those videos on social media. They're so satisfying.
They are. It's just as fun in real life.
When you see them and they're we're gonna restore. I've literally watched 4-hour videos of we're gonna restore this painting, and I fall asleep to it. I'm whoa, this is so cool, guys. I had a really interesting question for you.
Okay.
And it was, what is your perspective on the artistic culture, specifically in San Angelo? Ooh. Since you're not native to San Angelo, you're from Fort Worth. So how, being a part of the kind of artistic community in San Angelo, what do you think about it right now?
I think it's really fun. I love that there's so much art in this city, just walking around. There's murals and all of these little art museums and those tiny little boxes that have little tiny galleries in them.
Yeah.
I think it's so cute. And something that I love about San Angelo, I know not everyone thinks San Angelo is a small town, but being from Fort Worth, to me it kind of is. And I love how interconnected everything is and how everyone knows each other. And now being here for just 3.5-4 years, I know so many, I see the names in those same little places, and I'm I know those people.
Yeah, and they're friendly, which is what I like.
Yeah.
They really are.
Because it's not we have a very niche art community here, a very tight-knit community, but they're accepting and friendly. It's not a niche, tiny community where they're oh, you know what I mean?
It's it's not uppity.
No,
yeah,
it's not. And so many things are free, which I love, outdoor things, and that's something that's different here from Fort Worth, where there is we have some really amazing art, and we actually do have some really great free art museums, but some of the more local contemporary art feels less accessible than it does here, where it's kind of just a big with people who are friends.
Right, right, like the art in uncommon places, and then like Paintbrush Alley, and then what's that little
Pop Art Museum?
Yeah. The Pop Art Museum. I love going to all those.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's also, you can get really good pictures
yes,
there.
You can, definitely.
Okay, on my next question was, what was your first love in the art world? What really got you into it? Was
That's a really good question.
Doing it on your own? Was it like looking at paintings? What really got you into that?
For me, doing my own art was what got me into art. I think when I was like a kid and growing up, that was one of the main hobbies that I had, and it wasn't really like something that I chose to do. It was just something that I did, like, because I didn't have any other. Like, there was no question that was what I was going to do.
Yeah, you're born for it, basically. Yeah. Like, it was natural.
Yeah. So, yeah, making my own art, I think, is what really got me into art. And I remember I was exposed to art as a kid, which was I was very lucky. My grandmother is an artist also.
Oh, wow.
I have a lot of artistic people in my family. So, yeah, like, my grandmother letting me use her paints and stuff like that,
I love that.
Was something that got me into art.
And did you do majority like painting or drawing, sketching? What was your kind of niche that you really like locked into?
Yeah, I mostly did drawing and painting, but mostly because that was the materials that I had.
Exactly.
And then later on in high school, I got into making like little sculptures. I would make these little like dioramas inside of like jewelry boxes and stuff.
Wow.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, that was like that's still one of my favorite things to do, and just make like a tiny little world that you can go into in this tiny little space.
Those would sell well too, I bet. You know what I mean?
They probably would. Those ones particularly, I don't really sell because I just like to make them and keep them. So
your little trinket.
Yeah, exactly.
That actually is really funny because one of our other podcasts, we were doing a little grab bag episode, and we talked about this artist that made like the world's smallest like sculpture. It was like a little Lego brick that was like the size of a blood cell.
Whoa.
And it was like
insane.
It was insane.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane.
Miniature stuff, like big stuff, really huge stuff like the freaking Sistine Chapel, like whatever, and then like little tiny things always freaking astound me.
I love
I'm like,
those.
what the freak are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Being an art conservationist, that kind of means you're partly a historian as well. Would you agree with that?
I would say so, yeah. You definitely have to know a lot about the context of the artwork.
Okay, and having that in mind, do you have a favorite period in art history? And if you have a favorite period or a person or some historical piece that really grabs you, is there one that really strikes you?
For sure. I think I have like a couple different answers to that.
Okay.
I didn't think I was going to be interested in art history at all whenever I like started going to college to be an art major. And then I took my first art history class that was like the Art History 1 survey starting from the like prehistoric times, and literally day one of class I was like, wait, I think this is what I'm interested in actually.
I love Dr. Kantz. We have
I had a different art history professor back then, but
really?
I also loved Dr. Kantz.
Oh, yeah.
I just love art history, so yeah.
I think that's crazy when you start out with like Paleolithic like cave art, and then you move into like the freaking Roman Empire, bro. Yes. It's crazy. Like that is wild. How art is like basically intrinsic to like
it is.
The human experience.
That's what I love about it, is some of the like only things that we know about people from prehistoric times is the art that they left us, and that makes me feel so like insane. But so that was the first thing that made me love art history, and I don't see myself being able to work on prehistoric art. That's not really, that's more of an archaeology side of things. But I also, at the moment, am really into late Renaissance art, specifically like Italian late Renaissance art. I'm really into Caravaggio right now. That's probably my favorite artist at the moment.
Ooh,
and
alright.
Yes, so I've been like researching all of this stuff about him and looking at all of his paintings and stuff.
I feel like I made a little art history gallery just for my own enjoyment, because I also I have a passing interest.
Yes,
I'm not an expert, but I have a passing interest, and I was like, that name really sounded familiar, and I was just looking on here. I don't think I have one in my little slideshow.
That's fine.
But is there a favorite piece that you have of Caravaggio or whatever? I don't know if I said that.
I think my favorite, like, visually, is The Calling of Saint Matthew. I love that one. The, like, shadows and the way that the light moves throughout the piece. I just think it's beautiful. But I'm kind of like...
Yes.
Yeah, that one.
Whoa. Oh, my God.
I love it so much. It's it feels so, like, personal.
Did he do there's like a painting of like little girls and they're like watching, I don't know, that sounds so vague.
Might be a different one.
It might be a different one. I don't know, that was a weird question. I was like, that's a very vague question. But sorry, continue.
Okay, my other favorite is one that is at the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth, where I grew up, and it's called The Card Sharps, and it's one of his earlier paintings, and that one I love because that was the first one of his that I saw in real life, and that was like when I was way younger. I remember going to that museum and being like, oh, this painting is so beautiful. And then this summer when I went to Italy, I got to see so many more of his pieces, and so that one is like really special to me because that's the first one that I saw.
That's a lifetime right there.
Exactly. That is crazy. Yeah. That's one of my dream places to go.
It's really cool.
I want to go to Italy so bad.
You should.
And, oh my God.
Did that trip inspire your love for that like period of art and that like section for the Italian and everything, the Renaissance and everything?
Yeah, that was a lot of what we were looking at because obviously that's what's there. But getting to the professor that I had was an expert, or is. The professor that I had is an expert on Caravaggio specifically, and she gets to work with his paintings and like verify whether they're actually his or not.
That's crazy.
And I didn't know that when I went to that class. Like, I didn't know that's who my professor was going to be.
Wow.
So like that was so insane. She would just like show us what she was working on, and I would be like, oh my God, I know that painting.
Did that semester abroad give you a new perspective on art conservation, or did you have a different like view of it before you went and then after you went?
Yes, I think before I went, I had kind of started doing all of this stuff to prepare for like applying to graduate school, because I was pretty sure that I wanted to do art conservation just based on what I'd read about it and what I'd seen and heard about it, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be good at it or actually like it if I got the chance to do it. And so I was like taking chemistry classes and stuff, getting and like not sure if it was going to work out. And then I went last summer abroad and actually got to try it, and I do have a different perspective on it now, which is that is definitely what I want to do. So.
That'd be so hard, because you had like a life-changing, eye-opening summer.
Yes.
And then you had to come back.
And then I come back to St. Angelo.
And you still gotta wait.
Yeah, I know. Really.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That must have been culture shock and like the opposite direction.
Yeah, it kind of was more when I came back than when I went.
Right.
But
that's crazy. Now, going into like that chemical side that you mentioned, do you have a favorite skill that you learned through there, or is there one that was like kind of like the most tedious? I feel like there's some that, from an outside perspective, it seems like there are parts of it that are very like just very time consuming and small and hard to do.
Luckily, that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. It's like getting really focused on a really small detail of something forever and ever and ever.
This might sound stupid, but like what happens if in general, if you're working on a piece, and oil, like paints crack over time, you see it in art museums.
Yeah.
Like, what happens if I mean,
that's a great question.
What do you do?
There's a lot of it's high stakes, because a lot of mistakes. I mean, you're working right on a painting.
Yeah, it's like
like an original whatever.
Yeah, it's like 500 years old.
It depends on the piece, I think, but hopefully you don't make any mistakes that aren't reversible. But also a lot of conservation is already repairing damages, so if it comes to it, most damages can be repaired, but you definitely don't want to be the one that's doing the damage. Yeah. So it is scary. You just have to take that risk, because it's the only way to do anything.
Wow. Is there kind of, I feel like I would have almost a, not necessarily spiritual experience, but is there a kind of weird connection that you have when you are touching a painting that is that old and is an original painting, and you're like, the person that did this, that is a famous painter, touched this canvas, and now I'm repairing it. Is there like some sort of feeling that occurs with that?
To me, definitely, yeah. Wow. I haven't really worked on anything from like a very famous artist, luckily, because I think that would scare me a lot. But even like knowing this is so old and whoever did this is long gone, and like there's some paintings that I've been helping the Fort Concho Museum conserve in their collection that I've been, researching the background on this, and I can't find any information on who the artist is yet. Hopefully I will, but for the time being, like the only evidence that I know of this person's life is these paintings. Wow. And that's like a really crazy feeling. Yeah. And like also contributing to like those still existing and like going on into the future is something that is pretty awesome.
That's freaking crazy. I love that. That kind of does go into my next question.
Okay. I don't know if I even answered the question.
Oh, I mean,
I think I just skipped right over it.
You did great. It's whatever you think about, but it did go into this. Is there an artistic movement, period, or person to you that is the most important to conserve, or is that a ramification that you wouldn't necessarily put onto conservation?
I think I'm sure there are times when conservators have to decide that, but mostly those kind of like ethical things fall on like curators and people who own the art and are asking for it to be conserved. But I personally feel that any art is worthy of being preserved, so just by nature of it like being a part of history that's so like direct, like that we can look at it and see the same thing that the artist made however long ago, I think is a really important thing, that if we can take it into the future for the next generation, for them to learn from the same way that we can, I think that's really important for even things that aren't like famous or important. So
wow. I feel like there is like a crazy connection for art, because it's different than reading a book or reading a historical document. You're really getting almost firsthand direct information from the past into the present, and I find that like just crazy. That's gotta be a freaking mind-wielding thing when you experience it in real life.
I agree.
Yeah, who knows, like 200 years from now someone might be conserving your paintings. Do you know what I mean? Like, we never know. Like, that's wild to think about.
Yeah, that is crazy. And that also always reminds me, even though it's kind of like it's a really interesting microcosm of that, is like the Roman Colosseum. Yeah. And how like in its lifetime it was just like an old building. Yeah. And they would take from it and be like, oh, we need iron. We need whatever, quarry or whatever, and we're just gonna take from it, and then now it's a historical like preserved landmark. Yeah. But it's that ramification we put on it ourselves when we go like, this is actually historically important. Yes. Is there anything that you've experienced kind of like that, or you have any opinions on that, of kind of seeing something before it's deemed historically important? Yeah, so that's something that I have been thinking about a lot recently, of like whether there's a actual divide between like the present and the past, and like really the entire lifetime of an object, people have been like owning it and making decisions about what happens to it, and now it comes to us in the present, and we're just another like link in that chain of people making decisions about what to do with this. Like, we're eventually going to be part of its history as well, so I don't know, just trying to make the best decisions that we can with what we have. But like, I love that metaphor. You're just another link in that chain of its history. You're becoming a part of its history through your preservation and conservation. That's really cool. And then one last big question, then we'll kind of fizzle out and do some more like just little happy ones. A little more fun. I wanted to know, how can art, restoration, and conservation, in your perspective, change our perception of famous works in the zeitgeist? And my example is kind of the Ghent altarpiece being restored, and like having like the humanoid face of the lamb, and how that changes our perception of what that work means. Is that something that interests you, or what are your feelings
That is
on
really
that?
interesting to me. I think especially now there's like all of this crazy new technology that lets us see things like that without necessarily doing anything irreversible to the piece.
Right.
So, like, in that case, the lamb on the Ghent altarpiece had a really scary-looking face, and then whoever restored it in the past painted over the face and gave it, like, a much more pleasant-looking
a more, like, lamb face.
Right now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then when more modern conservators removed the, like, overpainting from the paint to bring it back to how it originally was, it kind of revealed this like different layer of the story. And I do think it's really interesting because again with like that they're not necessarily being like a division between the past and the present as like fundamentally different parts of like an object's lifetime.
Right.
In a lot of ways the whole story of the piece is important and not just the way that it originally was. So
right.
I do think that is something that a lot of conservators have to make decisions on of like how important is it that it looks like it did when it was made versus is just in good condition and can live on the way it is, or some kind of balance between those. But
it's like interpretations over time.
Yeah.
Kind of, I always kind of think of it, it kind of relates to that piece, like the Bible interpretations, where we have the King James Version, all the different versions, and how they're translated to fit the society of the time.
Right, definitely.
Yeah, like they literally admitted to,
Right, and how that can kind of go into like art preservation when you're like, oh, we'll change this or we'll make it this way because it's more palatable to the audience of the time rather than when it was originally built.
But then that's also kind of what we're doing now when we make those decisions to say, like, now we're more comfortable with it being, you know, the entire story of the piece and not just how it was. So that's also kind of just for the audience of the time. It changes over time what people want. But I think it also is maybe a little easier now because we have things like X-rays and infrared images and all of these ways that we can see an artwork in different ways, and then we can make like digital recreations of what it looked like without necessarily doing anything drastic to the piece, and kind of leaving that opportunity for maybe people in the future instead of avoiding that decision.
Oh, that's wild to me because when they painted over the original lamb's face, they probably had no idea.
No, probably not.
Ever again.
Because at the time they're still using that object.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's interesting, and I brought that one up because that is one of my favorite pieces.
It's a very
I think
interesting
it's really
one.
cool.
Yeah.
I have kind of a little fascination with that. Do you have any sort of one piece? I know you mentioned your favorite, the Caravaggios, but do you have any pieces like that just really capture you?
Yeah. Let me think.
I know that's kind of a hard ball.
That's a hard ball. That's like asking a musician, like, what's your favorite song?
All right, what's your favorite song? Yeah, for real.
It's very hard.
I think most of the pieces that I feel like that about are ones that I've seen in real life. And like there were some that I was able to see in Italy of like a lot of pieces that were, especially wall paintings or frescoes, are often in really bad condition, and they have to make all of these restoration choices to like be able to bring it to the to let people still enjoy it. And I think like after learning more about how those are done and how those decisions are made, seeing any kind of piece where I can see what the conservators did or like what the restorers did, I really love being able to see that and like knowing that they had to make all these decisions.
That's cool. You can kind of see the thought process almost in action.
Yeah, because there's sometimes that they'll try and restore it like so that you don't notice that anything is not original, but then there's other times that they'll just sort of do like a sort of general color field so that you can still pick out which parts are original and which parts are added later, just so that the viewer can kind of decide for themselves or like figure it out for themselves.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Ask a question.
Oh, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
I'm waiting patiently.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just kidding. How many art classes have you taken? Like, do you have like is it like, do you have basically like the majority? You said art generalist, obviously, but like, has the majority of it been like art history courses? Like, have you taken all of them here?
Unfortunately, I have not taken all of them here. There's one that Dr. Kantz teaches that's like a Renaissance type class that I haven't been able to take just because of schedule things.
Yeah.
I've taken most of the art history classes offered, and we don't even have an art history minor here.
Yeah.
So there's only so much that I can do.
But you basically do at this point, probably. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to look at your transcript and be like, oh.
That's what I would hope. But, there's always a chance. There's a couple classes that I'm going to have to take after I graduate before I can get into most of the schools that I'm looking at. So.
And there's like 2, right? Because I remember Dr. Kotz.
There's there's only a couple. There's 4 that I'm looking at in the U.S. that have painting conservation, but mainly there's 2 that I prefer out of those. And they're pretty competitive, so it might be a couple years.
All right, and one last thing I wanted to know. What is something that brings you joy every day?
Every day?
Yeah. What's something that just makes you smile?
Okay. Well, you know what? I actually do think art conservation brings me joy every day. It's something that I do get to do a little bit of every week, so a couple times a week. So I get to, like, research the background on all of that stuff and, like, buy all the little equipment that I need, and it's so fun to me. It's so exciting to me. I can't believe that I get to do it. So.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That makes me so happy. I love that. Yay. I love when people love what they do.
I know.
I love when people. Yeah, that's what. Like, I feel like a lot of people are just too scared to take that leap. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, oh, well, I just want to get a degree in marketing or business, or like, because they're scared. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I feel like if you're smart about it, and you work really hard and you network, it is possible to be successful in art field. I
agree. It's a lot of hard work, but in knowing that that's my dream, I kind of in a lot of ways feel like that's the only option for like what I'm going to do. So it's hard work that I'm going to do because I know what I want to do, and that's what I'm going to do. So
you will succeed, so
you will. Yes. So. All right, so that's going to be it for us today on Articulture. Today we learned that doing what you love actually brings you joy.
No way.
It's really important. I want to thank you, Hannah, for coming in and giving us some lively, interesting discussion, and we'll see y'all next time.
Cool, thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Yay.